Hey guys, and welcome to the show. Something familiar about the guy that I have as a guest today. I see the RB above the door. He looks kind of like Ryan Berry, except there's like a beard now. What's up with that?
I decided to say when in Rome,
Yeah, yeah. Well, so here's the deal, right?
Yeah.
According to the show manifest, the rules of the show,
Mhm.
somebody has to have facial hair, and since I shaved mine,
we just swapped. That's
we just swapped. How
yeah.
you been?
I've been doing well. How about you?
Man, a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm really excited about AI. I've seen some neat stuff. There's actually a Microsoft website where, and you may know the URL, I don't remember it off the top of my head, where you can give it a text file and it'll create a bot that just answers questions that people type in.
Yep. Yeah, and that's actually, some of our customers actually do that for, oftentimes on the marketing site, they might have an FAQ, or some back end, URL that actually has some details about, exchange policies and that sort of thing. That's a very quick way to be able to build an interactive bot where you can actually ask questions and instead of actually trying to find that information by clicking around on resources.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. Plus, you can make a bot. I
Yeah,
mean, you can do it by just creating a list.
that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today, I don't actually have a bot example, but I do have a bunch of other stuff we'll talk about because AI is really encompassing of so many different things, and that's one of those, AI, machine learning. Very overused term, in my opinion, much like microservices is another one. So, we'll talk a little bit about, what sorts of things we have within the arsenal of Azure. And then we'll take a look at some stuff that I built, got a little Raspberry Pi demo, some Python scripts that can actually invoke some of these services and do some smart things, or letting the computer rather, or our cloud do some smart things to make some inference from what data we give it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so let me just ask you a question right off the bat. So
Sure.
we have AI services that you can just implement in Azure.
Correct. Yeah. So we kind of have two different layers. We have one on one end. We have the suite of services called cognitive services, and that's where and it's inclusive of some of the bot capabilities you talked about. You can actually provide it as an example, the image or the video for this video, or the file for this video rather, and it will actually transcribe all of the narrative that you and I have back and forth as a text file. You can actually provide it, some, facial picture of one of us, and it will actually detect what our facial sentiment is. It'll actually identify how many, individuals it actually detects. It'll provide some details about, what sort of, what our gender is, what our age is, and so forth. So those are services that you can use with very little training. Just, they're APIs that you just create an endpoint in Azure. There's a key associated with it, and then you can wire up your application to invoke them. So, we have customers using them on mobile applications or web applications. So it's a way that you can leverage the power of some of our AI capabilities without having to train a model and, or build a model. And, and that's kind of the second layer of machine learning. And if you think about things like, I actually have another podcast that I host that we had a guest on there that talked about, she built this fantasy football model. And from that, the way she built it rather was by taking all the statistical data from, different sources, player information, historic or play history, team history, how does that player do when they're up against another player of from, team team X versus team Y. So, really taking all of that data and trying to make some informed decisions based on what's happening, historically.
So
Yeah.
So you're trying to suck all the fun out of football. That's what
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's funny. She said she knew nothing about football. she built this machine learning model, and she annihilated her husband, who's a football fanatic, with her fantasy league.
That's funny.
So hers was aimed at just trying to gain points all the time, whereas her husband was trying to shoot for the moon, and occasionally he might beat her, but overall, because she was consistent, she was able to beat her.
I need to talk to her because I'm in a NASCAR fantasy league with some of my buddies that are actually NASCAR drivers, right? Some of them are actually NASCAR drivers, and it would be hilarious to
to beat them. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, to beat them. Yeah,
because they're just going to go on sentiment and kind of who they think is best, and when you have a computer kind of make some historic or some statistical inferences from that data, that's a whole other story. And that's where to be able to do that sort of thing in Azure or in any solution that's able to do that sort of provide that sort of decision-making capability to you, you have to build well, first of all, you have to give it data, and then you have to kind of train that data to be able to line up with the data that you trained it. So if that makes sense. So basically, you can so you can build a model and then use the data that you fed the model to actually see how well is its f of x or its function that is established, its statistical function, how accurately does the model predict what's happened in the past. And if it matches pretty closely, that the slope of that line and the scatter points of the real data that you're giving it match pretty closely, then it's probably safe to say it's an accurate model to kind of predict the future. So that's but to build that, it takes some time because you need data, you need some background in some of the statistical models that we have in our tools, and kind of have to put all that together, and then you have something that you can invoke with a service, much like our cognitive services that you can just use right out of the box.
Oh, that's cool, man. That's pretty neat. So you've got some demos for us today?
Sure. Yeah. I think we can dive right in. We've got a couple of slides just to kind of give you some background, and it'll cover a little bit what I just talked about, where I'll talk about kind of the two different layers of capabilities we have, and then we have a third layer where we just have really incredibly fast machines. Machines with graphical processing units where customers can use their own software that might take advantage of some of that underlying hardware to be able to make those sorts of informed decisions from models that they might build with custom software that they might be using to do that. So we'll kind of talk about all of it.
Yeah.
So Lex, are you a Terminator fan?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so kind of the premise of the story. Yeah, you have the rise of the machines. You have these machines that kind of become self-aware and start fighting against the humans.
But for any of that to be true, machines would have to be able to learn. Wait a minute.
So that's why I get a kick out of this picture. And somebody had actually posted this on Twitter and said that some other cloud service had provided this as a security image, sort of a CAPTCHA image, to select, all the tiles that contain Sarah Connor. So this is a type of data that a machine might use to learn about how to find Sarah Connor and perhaps send the machines back from the future to track her down. So just thought we'd start with that.
Yeah. Woo.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about just let this build out. And so this is kind of showing those three different tiers of services I talked about. So starting with the upper left quadrant up over here, the Azure AI services, that's where the pre-built services like the bot service you just highlighted, some of the machine learning capabilities that are built into Azure where you can kind of build a statistical model, feed it data, and train it, much like what my colleague used for Fantasy Football League. And then we also have a number of pre-built services to do things like face detection, sentiment analysis. We actually have a really cool kiosk demo that any customer can download and wire up to Azure to experiment with this, where they can, it's a demonstration that would be an example of perhaps something running in a mall where you have a map that you go up to into a mall, and it shows you there you are here. But what if you had cameras on that detected that you were a male and a middle-aged male that might like to know about a tool store that's right down the hall that might be having a sale today. So you can kind of do some cool things with some of this technology. Of cool and creepy at the same time, but that's an example of some of the cognitive services that exist, and I'll show you, where you can download this package of examples and demos that you can use to wire up to Azure and actually try it yourself. And then underneath all of this, on the bottom part here, the Azure infrastructure, we have a number of different capabilities that support a lot of these AI services. Cosmos SQL, the data stores. Then we have, IoT Edge and Spark, these different compute engines that can actually surface data from data stores into some of our AI services to make decisions. And all of that's powered by some of our GPU, graphical processing unit machines under the covers, or our FPGA, the field programmable gate arrays, or grid arrays, I think is what the G stands for. But these are processors that have microcode. So like in the Intel world, or AMD world, x86 world, you have there's actually firmware that's actually on the microprocessors that run instructions to be able to show this slide deck on a screen. In the FPGA world, those chips are optimized with firmware to be able to do a specialized task. So, in Azure, we actually use those for being able to provide really high-speed networking to our customers. So we offload things like, network packet, handling and so forth to these specialized chips. And they can also be programmed to do things, from a statistical analysis standpoint, to be able to drive some of the Azure AI capabilities and services. So this is the endpoint, Lex, that my Raspberry Pi is actually invoking. So this is that cool capability of Azure where you pay nothing until you actually need it. The serverless, one of the many serverless capabilities in Azure. Right. In this case, this Azure Functions feature. So I've written this in C#. And it's taking the image that I'm passing in. So if you recall from the shell script, this is the parameter that's actually being posted. So it's being passed in as into the body as a JSON object. So I'm actually deserializing it. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually creating another request to actually invoke our the endpoint for our Cognitive Services API. So I'm taking that URL and I'm turning right around and I'm calling another service. So you kind of think of this Azure function as a proxy that I'm poking it to wake it up, and then it takes the data I give it and it actually calls my Cognitive Services API and returns a result. So
that's kind of neat.
Yeah. So if I go over here and just to test it, so you can see this is actually the URL that's actually pointing to one of those images that just got uploaded from my Raspberry Pi. And this looks kind of ugly, but if you look at it, let me see. It's actually saying, see, present. Where's the probability? Okay, so 0.99% probability of me being present, and like a 9 to the negative 6th chance of me not sitting in my seat. So it's using those two tags I trained it on, and it's actually giving me the probability of the image that I fed it of being one or the other. So you can think of this or if you think about this, you can do some cool stuff. You could set this up on your desk, and when your kids come in and liberate your laptop or your webcam from your desk, you can have it trigger an event that texts you, so you can call them and say, hey, what are you doing in my office? So if it's not somebody that the image or Cognitive Services actually recognize. So this actually is kind of an end-to-end example showing starting with a Raspberry Pi and I just use that because it was kind of a cool thing to use to actually capture an image. And on a Raspberry Pi, I'm using something called Motion. It's a package that actually detects motion from a camera and creates an image, uploading images to blob storage, poking the function to run, and then using the function to invoke my Cognitive Service to return a result, whether or not I'm sitting here or not.
Wow, that's really cool. So the Raspberry Pi takes the picture that spawns this code to run, which generates the status.
Yep. So there's some missing pieces there because I'm not actually doing anything with the result on a Raspberry Pi, and I'm not, sending a text message or, a message maybe in Teams. There's a really easy way to integrate this with Teams. So I'm not, I'm missing some of those steps to be able to kind of wire this up, in a production manner. But the gist is there, kind of showing end to end how this functionally would behave or work.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So when do I have to start worrying about Skynet?
That's a really good question. So the final thing I'll show you is that, so this is a Python script, and I have an image that I'm using from Wikipedia of Times Square, and this actually runs really quickly. That I'm actually using the Cognitive Services Vision API, so not the one I trained, but the one that actually detects what's in the picture. And when this runs, it says, this is actually the picture that I fed it, and it's saying a group of people on a city street at night is actually what's being returned. So it does it that quickly. This is
so you didn't label that picture.
No, I did not. This is all data that's actually, so you can see some of the other properties, busy, crowded, lights, woman, bus. This is all, so kind of summarize that and made a description on the image. So
Wow.
this is running in Python, but it's hitting the same cognitive services, just using a random image from Wikipedia. So this, my friend, is very close to Skynet when you think about it. So,
Yeah, we don't want to scare people.
No, we don't. No, I mean, if you think about some of the cool stuff that you can do with this, like I mentioned, in the store situation, or you highlighted earlier, like a bot where you can actually take, FAQs that might be on your website and expose them in a conversational way to customers. Everybody's strapped for resources, and if your business volume increases and you don't have enough customer service reps to answer questions, that would be a great way to offload some of that, some of those common Q&A questions that somebody might be asking you, where's my order, what's the status of my refund, those types of common things. You can actually take those bot services and plumb them into back-end capabilities you might have in your line of business systems to look up a customer's order, or look up, identify who the customer is, and actually converse with them through a text messaging interface, as if a human was sitting behind it. So there's some really powerful things that you can apply this to outside of kind of the creepy effect that everyone thinks about when they see some of this stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah. So there are lots of non-creepy usages.
Yeah, exactly.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So hopefully machine learning is kind of a complicated subject, and I wanted to kind of distill it down in not really layman's term, but some basic capabilities of machine learning capabilities we have in Azure that anybody can use. And I'll give you the link that you can put in the show notes to that the intelligent kiosk demo, because that you can download right from GitHub, compile it in Visual Studio, and you can use a lot of the things I showed you earlier with sentiment analysis. So it's an easy way to kind of test and understand how some of those things work.
Yeah. So a couple of things, just to recap, right? Just to hit the high points.
Sure.
These are services. I just want to make sure that I'm correct in my bullet points here.
Yep.
These are services that anybody that subscribes to Azure can go and implement.
You got it. So I actually had to create these endpoints. So to use them, I had to actually go in here so if I type in vision, you see computer vision is actually one of the services. So I actually have to provision one of these with some tier of service. When I do this in any Azure subscription, it gives me an endpoint that I can invoke, as well as a key that I use to pass into it to be able to take advantage of whatever the feature is behind that service. So I've got a bunch of them you see in my subscription here lit up. The text API, translation services, and so forth. Wow,
that's really cool.
Yeah. Yes. So in the one that I was actually using, so this one actually is using the non, I have this one kind of in a higher tier of service. And if I go to the monitor, this is actually the one that I use for my training purposes. And you can see over, earlier today, there should be some pretty big spikes in, some of the the calls that I was actually passing into it. So yeah, you can kind of see the call times that when I actually went through and trained some of the models.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. Great demo.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, like I said, man, that was really cool. I can't thank you enough for doing this for us.
Yeah, no problem. So hopefully it inspires some people or some of our customers to kind of think about things that they might be able to do in their own situations, and provided some some insight to those with curious minds about what some of this machine learning stuff can really do.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And there's a link that you can provide, I guess,
Yes.
for us to throw up. Okay.
Yep. Yeah,
All right, we'll put that up.
Yeah.
And speaking of links that are on the page that you're looking at, just remember, ha 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 ha. Gotta subscribe. Gotta subscribe.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So wherever that link is, it might be here or here, but wherever it is, subscribe because we need the subscriptions.
Click the big red shiny button.
That's right. Click the big red shiny button. And I'm sorry for making you listen to me sing that. That was embarrassing. But
you needed to be doing that, playing that guitar that I sent you a link to. That has strings.
Well, wait till you see the show opening. But anyway, AI probably could have predicted I was going to sing that.
Yeah, we should have given it some of your historical videos and let it rip to see what it.
Please don't do that. All right. Well, listen, thanks, man. I really appreciate you doing this again. And
no problem.
You're a prolific Taste of Premiere guest, and so I'm sure we'll see you again shortly.
All right.
And so thanks again. And without further ado, that's your Taste of Premiere.